Hello, travelers. We're going to do some cold weather forging tonight. Yee. I'm going to be working on some projects. Fancy projects. Pretty good. Oh, night out. All right, here we go. Here we go. We got to get the vibe set. Got a little work to do on that one yet. A lot of times I'll take the knives when I get them about 80 or 90% done, and I'll take them to Joel and I'll have him do the sheaths before I finish the knives. But I got this one mostly done. That's elkhorn. Chunky elkhorn. I think that's ladder Damascus. Thanks. Thanks for the likes. Then we're working on some other little funny things. No, I don't. I'm so busy doing my own stuff, I don't have much time to follow other blacksmiths. I'm pretty busy. Pretty busy. Okay, where are we at here? This way a little. Okay. Okay, what's everybody got to say? Hello, 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 hello. A couple of things we've been working on lately. Scorpion, my buddy made for me. Thanks for the likes, appreciate it. If you have any questions, let old Grandpa NJ, the 36-year blacksmith, answer any questions for you. You just put them in the comments and I'll get to them in between my little rotation of projects here. Going to be making some custom chain links. We're doing some hooks for some hat racks like this one. Going to be working on the little hooky bit. goes down here. Some of these hat racks. Like this. I'm going to be doing this part of this tonight. And we're going to be working on some of these. Got to do a bunch of these up. So we're going to do some of that. We've got all kinds of little projects we're going to be working on. So a lot of different stuff, and I'm more than happy to answer questions for you guys. Just leave them in the comments. We're going to turn this into something like this. Yeah, it's when it does that, it's starving for oxygen, and so a lot of times it has to kind of heat up. The inside of the forge has to heat up before it burns the oxygen, before it'll start sucking the oxygen through the manifold at the top of the. You might have to tweak how much oxygen, tweak your manifold up and down a little bit, or open or close your forge a little bit. Once it gets hot on the inside, it isn't nearly as much of a problem. Okay. Set the tongs down here. When you're doing tapered drawouts, you want to do them on the square. And then I'll go back when I get those where they're fairly the same length. I'll go back and I'll even them up, get them even, and then I'll round them up. But it's much easier to draw this stuff out, a taper out on the square than it is trying to keep it round and do it. See, I drew that out square, and then I went back and I rounded it up with plantishing blows and took the hammer marks out. How's everybody doing? Where's everybody from? Let me go grab my drink. Whoops, there goes my phone. I'm plugging. Plug that back in so it doesn't die on me. Oh boy, everybody. You got too much stuff plugged in. Troubles of technology. So we're working on a bunch of different stuff. Just about at place. I like to start bending these. Something like that. We'll get a couple of them forged up and then we'll bend them. Pennsylvania. I'm in Cody, Wyoming, the east entrance of Yellowstone National Park. Thanks for the likes, everybody. Welcome to the evening forge in. Working on a bunch of projects today. Right now, working on these. They're going to be a little different shape than this, but this was kind of a proof of concept of the chain links that I'm going to be doing here. And we're going to use that tool in that vise right there to bend these. What I've done is I've taken this old wrench and I've rounded up the jaws in it so they're not sharp on the edges. And we're going to use this as a what they call a turning fork. You'll see that working here in just a second. But I need a little water. Because we're going to have to courtesy quench a little piece of this. So I'll use this water for that. I'm going to tip this out like that, and I'm going to like that. Might pull that around a little more and just do a little more whoop-de-woo there. Just a little more. If I'm in love with that yet or not, we'll see. I didn't get enough of that hot, so I'm going to have to go back in here and reheat this. This is called a set of scrolling tongs. That. Something like that. That's more what I'm looking for. I can just about, once I figure it out, I can just about do it in one heat. Once I get them all worked out. Yeah, something like that. That's half of it done. See, they're round on the inside. Something like that. Well, we kind of got to wait. I can only heat up because of this little one burner forge that I use. It's super efficient, but it only heats up about 4 inches at a time. And so you kind of got to do everything in chapters, which is good anyway, because you run out of heat doing long pieces like that. You run out of heat anyway. So it's fine to have to put it back in there. I'll be able to do them in about 2 heats once everything gets up and running and going. That's what we're going for. Well, it might seem like it's a lot of fun, but it's really a lot of repetitive stuff. So I've done about 12 foot of this chain, so that's about 4 inches, about 3 per foot. I've done about 12 feet. I need to do another 5 or 6 feet, and that's what we're working on tonight between other projects. Yes, those do get hot. I have several streams. So I have my Etsy store link in my bio on my page. I would appreciate it if you go and look at the Etsy store and maybe go like some stuff. And so I do a ton of this kind of stuff. So here's one of the things. And then I do stuff like this. So these are hoof picks for cleaning out the horse's feet. And then, of course, I do a lot of knives. The knives I mostly sell locally. I might put 1 or 2 of these on the store. I don't know. We'll see. I occasionally do custom stuff for friends. This is a custom one that I did for a guy here in town. But mostly it's online. And then I get a pittance from YouTube. But I got a couple of stores on Main Street in Cody, Wyoming that I sell out to that carry my stuff. One of the art stores here in town. We have a cooperative. Well, my knives run the gamut. So I do everything from $500 Damascus knives. And of course, I don't do this kind of leather work. I have a friend of mine in town who has done over 800, well, probably over 700 knife sheaths for me. And so he does my leather work for me. So that's a $500 knife. But then I do $20 knives too. And everything in between. So these are about $25. They're made out of a horseshoe. But then, like this will be like a $300 knife, and it's a piece of Damascus. And this stuff very rarely makes it to Etsy. Most of the time, as soon as I get these done and I lay them out, they're gone. So my shtick really is I make knives out of horseshoe rasp. So there's the horseshoe rasp, and this one's not done. You can see that I haven't finished the handles. So I appreciate that. But a lot of times I'll take the sheaths, I'll get the knives about this far done, and then I'll take them to Joel and I'll let him finish them. And that way I can finish up the sheath or finish up the knife. And he does beautiful work. You can just see he's got a lot of practice. So the anvil isn't just one tool. You use, the reason that they're shaped the way they are is because there's a lot of tools on one tool there. So you use different places on the anvil to do different stuff. I started as a horseshoer 35 years ago, 1989. I started shoeing horses. And then I blacksmith. I made all my own tools, did horseshoes. And then I blacksmith in the wintertime. And I've been a full-time blacksmith for about 15 years now. So, but I went to school. There are some blacksmith. How old? How did you get? Oh, there are some blacksmithing schools, but mostly you're going to really learn back before I was doing this before the internet, and so so there was no real blacksmiths much around when 35 years ago. So I had to I went to farrier school and learned how to build horseshoes and build all the tools that I needed for shoeing horses. And then I just kind of apprenticed and gathered my knowledge like that. So I apprenticed with several different guys and joined a couple of organizations. There's a lot of blacksmiths organizations around now that there never used to be. Which one? This one? Or this one? Or this one? I've just got the 3 anvils in the shop now, but I've got about 5 anvils. So if you really want to see more about it, you can just go. I have 1,100 videos. You can go watch my other videos if you're really interested. Bigger hammer. Different tones. Appreciate it. Yeah, if you really want to support, the best way to do that is to subscribe. Go watch a bunch of my videos. So it's like 20 degrees outside. This little forge will heat up this shop so fast that I'll be into my shirt. I'm stripping off layers, getting into my shirt sleeves. Appreciate it. If you want to see some of the finished products, you can go over to the Etsy store. You just Google Cody Iron Works, it'll come up. All right, we're getting there. Get a few of these done. Those little light blows that I'm doing as the steel cools down are called plantishing blows. And what it does is it takes the hammer marks out. This steel, when it's hot, is a lot like trying to work with real frozen ice cream. So think about how hard ice cream gets when it's really froze. And working this steel is a lot like that. So I'm kind of done with him for right now until I can take the tooling out of this vise. So I'm going to set him aside for right now. You can see, so what I'll do is here in a minute, I'll put him in the forge again, and I'll do his face. I'll do his eyes and his mouth and his nose. But we've got to wait a little bit because I don't have room to do everything. So hammer. So this is about a 2-pound hammer. This is about a 2.5-pound hammer, 38, I think, is what these are. And the biggest hammer I swing freehand with one hand is a 5. This is a 5-pound, and I might use this later. So this is a 5-pound cross peen hammer. This is a cross peen hammer. And this is a rounding or a turning hammer. See how it's got a flat face on it and a round face? This is, for 90% of what I do, this is the hammer that I use. But for this little light stuff like this, there's no sense swinging a big 2.5, 3-pound hammer. I can use a 1.5-pound hammer, and I don't get so fatigued in my arm. Okay, there we go for that. Now I'll heat those up. We'll bend them in a minute. Thank you for that. I appreciate that very much. Thank you. That every little bit helps. I appreciate that a lot. My favorite project, I really enjoy building tools. Here's an axe that my son and I forged up last spring. That's made out of truck spring. I like doing bits and spurs. I just don't like to be bored, so I do a lot of the same stuff. Like I've done something like 3,000 of these, and so anytime I can do something different than the hooks, I'm pretty happy. Okay, so now you're going to have to kind of watch close here what I'm doing. Appreciate that super chat. Thank you very much. So this coffee can is full of water, and we're going to quench off a little piece of this. So I'm going to quench the end of this just a little. And I'm going to hook this in here like this. And there's half of our chain link. Okay. End that off. So when you have a good tool, it's pretty easy to do that. Boy, I appreciate that super chat. Thank you very much. Thanks for all the likes, everybody. Hello. There's our chain link. Generally, I wouldn't cool those off like that. I'd let them naturalize, but there's our links. And then I'm going to show you how to hook them together here in a minute. So when you're doing this crazy stuff like this, you have to have all kinds of specialty tools. So you can't just have one set of tongs. You have to have tongs that fit all different kinds of shapes because you're holding this stuff in all different kinds of ways. And so the difference between a piece of 1/4-inch round stock and a piece of 5/16 round stock, you have to have two different sized tongs to really have them hold good. And of course, in order to do that, you have to be able to build your own tongs. So one of the first things as a blacksmith you need to know how to learn how to do is make your own tools. Now there is a little difference in each one, but the way that you get the consistency in doing them is I always use, when I'm shaping them, I always use the same spot on the anvil. So I always go, when I'm doing that little draw out and that little curve, I always go to the same spot on the anvil, and that way you always get fairly even from one to the next. And occasionally you have to fiddle with it a little bit. Don't do bazookas, I'm afraid. That's more of a, what is that? What is that YouTube channel where he does that stuff? Ordnance Lab. That's more of an Ordnance Lab thing. You want to see how to make bazookas and stuff, Ordnance Lab is your channel. Ran out of heat in that one. Last one, always run out of heat on the last one, it seems like. So you always make a few extras, because you'll always have a few that are a little deviate more than the rest, and so you always make a few extras, and that way you have enough to so you don't have to go back and try to straighten something that's a little too crooked. Here we go. Shut that forge off for a minute. And I'll show you how we hook these together. So you got to be careful of that tool because it's hot now. And so you got to be a little delicate about touching. But I want to show you how simple. You don't have to have fancy, expensive tooling. You can just make your own tools. And here's a tool that I made. It's just a couple of pieces welded together that clamp in the vise. And this is just sockets of different sizes, and that's how I get a consistent size on my little scrolls. And that way I can use the same tool, different socket. And these are just cheap sockets that I picked up at pawn shops. So I'm into them, 10, 15, 25, 50 cents a piece. And so you don't have to worry about getting them hot and taking the temper out of them. And now I'll show you how we hook the chain together. So I let these naturalize, and then I just clamp them in the vise. And I use this little bending tool. Now generally I will use the vise that's mounted to the floor. I've got 5 vices in here mounted to the floor, but for demonstration purposes, And that's, I figure, about 3 links per foot. So there's an extra little 2¼ feet or 30 inches, something like that. But there's the custom chain, and this is going to go into a chandelier. But that's why it's so expensive, is because I don't know what we're an hour in, and so I'm an hour into that, and so what am I making? A little better than 2 foot an hour, so that's some expensive chain. So, and it's art, as you can see, it's art. No two are exactly the same. If you want machinist exactly the same work, then you'll have to go to somebody else, because I'm doing blacksmithy type work. But you'd have a hard time telling one from the other, especially when they're hanging from the ceiling. So, what do you guys think? And then generally what I will do is I will leave that, like I'll just rub them dry so they don't rust. But the mill scale will actually protect this. And then what I'll do is, if somebody wants it really protected, like it's going to go someplace pretty high humidity, I'll use a traditional flaxseed oil cut with a little turpentine, and I'll heat them up. Yeah, not bad, huh? This wasn't my design. I actually copied this design from somebody else. I really like this style of chain better. But the guy who ordered this, I was trying to copy something that he already had made up. So I do very little custom work like this anymore. I'm so busy with the Etsy store and my own projects. I don't do much custom stuff anymore. There's a very talented machinist, artist across the street by the name of Brady Hopple, who owns Art Sand and Steel. And he does a lot of custom work, and he says, if I have to use a hammer, I ain't going to do it. And so I do all his hammer work for him. And then I have him do all my plasma cuts and stuff for me, because that's what he specializes in. So I think that is enough to finish the order. I don't know, I might have to do a few more links, but I think you need the 15 feet. I think I had about 12 feet done. So there's that finished. One project done tonight. So now we can look on the rest of this stuff. Okay. So now I'll put old Steerhead back in the forge, and we'll light it back up. We'll finish him up. Done with our quench tank. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thanks, everybody, for coming along. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer. While that's heating up, I'll show you some of the work. I don't know if you've been here. I'm sure some people are new. So we're working on some knives. I'm going to try to finish up a couple of these tonight. That is Damascus. I'll have to polish it up and re-etch it. Boy, Joel does nice work on those sheaths. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish this one up. My shtick, I really like making stuff out of other stuff. So these are old horseshoe and rasps. And that's all one piece of steel that I forged. So this started its life as one of these. This is a rasp that the horseshoers used to dress the feet of the horses down. They work really good for woodworking. If you can ever find some of these around, they work really, really good for doing woodworking. That's black walnut. That's going to be pretty nice when I get done with it. And then this was a custom one I did, and I don't do too many custom ones, but here's a custom one that I did. And that's elk horn. And you can see the Damascus pattern. I'm not quite done with it. I need to. I'm going to put a finial in it. And I might do that tonight, and I might wait until tomorrow to do that. That's kind of one of those things that I might have to do when I'm fresh in the morning. So it's going to get a finial like this one. But Joel sure does a nice job on those. Thanks, I appreciate it. But I do a lot of real simple ones too. And then, of course, I do a lot of hardware stuff. That's what they look like when they come out of the forge. So that's the forge scale or the mill scale, and it's dull like that. Then once I put the linseed oil on it, they get pretty shiny and nice. So, all right, well, let's see where our steer head is here. So the thing about blacksmithing is you can't just go down to Ace and buy specialty tools. Like the tool that does that eye, you have to make those tools because you can't buy them. I mean, maybe you can buy them someplace, but I just make my own. So I make a lot of specialty tools. The only thing I really don't make in the shop is I don't make anvils. And I have made hammers, but because I don't have much help in the shop, it's just me. I tend to, so I don't have a striker. Unless my son is around, so I generally buy hammers. I mean, I do make. I do make axes and stuff. Most of the ones I do, though, I drift them, and this is forge welded in here. Doing the eyes on axes. Drifting these eyes out of this big heavy material like this is about more than I can do by myself. And I do have a power hammer, but my power hammer doesn't have much throw in it. And so trying to get tooling in there is pretty hard. So I don't do a ton of this style of tool. But I do occasionally do them. Okay. I'm going to use a little heavier hammer, I think, for this. Happy little spearhead hook. Questions, comments? I've got a finished one over here. I guess I can show you what they look like finished. So here's a finished one. There is a lot of forging that goes into one of those. Ton of forging in the head, and then you think you're done, and then you got to do the tail end. And then you'll probably, if you stick around, you'll see me do all the rest of this, because that's 100% forged. The only thing that isn't forged is I do drill the holes, and I can punch them, but it's a lot easier to drill them. And I have a drill press here, so I go ahead and just drill them out. You can see his little face. Happy little steer heads. I do a lot of steers and I do a lot of horses. I do some dragons and I do some other stuff too, but thanks for the comments. I appreciate it. Thanks for everybody coming in. I really appreciate it. So, you know, that's what he looks like before, but what really makes him look like a steer, it's all in the horns. And of course, it's the last thing that you have to do on the face, because if you try to do the horns before you get the face done, you end up wonking out the horns when you clamp them in the vise. And that's about the only time I use a glove, because that material gets hot. And if you're messing around, boy, it'll take the hair right off your, it's so hot, it'll take the hair right off the bottom of your arm. So I don't forge in gloves. I only weld in gloves, but that's why I used a glove, is because that material gets if you can make a longer chisel, but it's a lot harder to get the chisel placed right if it's long. So for this particular process, I use a pretty short chisel, and then I just wear a glove. Like if I'm punching or something, I'll use a punch or a drift that long. So that extra 4 inches of length keeps you from burning your hand. But that length of chisel is about as handy as you can get to work. And you can see that I have used the heck out of these. So they start to spall after 15 or 20 years, and I have to go in and grind all of the spalling down, because you don't want that coming off at 500 miles an hour and hitting you in the arm. So you can see that on all of these tools, I've ground them back so they don't spald. And that's a really important thing. You got to know how to do that, especially if you're doing demonstrating, because invariably that sucker will spald off. When that comes off, they call that spalling. When you got a bunch of people standing around. So I'm pretty careful about dressing my tools down. When I say I make all my tools, I'm not joking. I do make almost all the tools that I use. A little set of dividers. Not as fancy as some guys make, but they are very useful. Okay, so to do the horns, that's fairly good. Let's compare. Not bad. Once I get them done, you'd have a hard time telling what was the first one I did and what was the second one I did. But I bet I've done 500 of these. We all have a little different way of doing all this stuff, all us blacksmiths. Appreciate it. Thank you. I tried. Well, this is 36 years this year. I've been doing this professionally. Thank you. I'm kind of a hat guy. I've got a lot of hats. So what I'm working on, when I'm not working on that steer head, what I'm doing is I'm working on these hooks. And all us blacksmiths have a different way of doing these. And 35 years of doing this, you figure out a way to do it. I like to upset the backside and feed that in there, and it keeps that from being sharp, so nothing can hook on the inside of that. And I don't like a pointed hook much. Even though if I've got no. So I don't like a hook that's sharp like this to hang stuff on, because if you're hanging towels or something on something that comes down pretty thin, you'll end up punching a hole in it, or like a jacket or something. And so I like to make anything that's going to hang a coat or a blanket or whatever. I want something that's kind of fat and disperses the weight over the top of it, so you're not punching holes in whatever you're hanging that on. But that's what those are. And then that gives you a place to hang your coat. You can see some hanging back there behind me. If you want to see a more in-depth of what I do, this is kind of just a little taste. If you want to see something in-depth about what I'm doing here, you can go and watch some of my videos. And if you are like everybody today and want to see a 15-minute videos, I've got a ton of 1-minute videos, but I've also got a bunch of long-form videos that you can watch. Okay, so earlier we were talking about rounding hammers and turning hammers and why the different shapes. Well, you'll see why I use this shaped hammer right here. We're going to do this on the tail end of this hook. There you can see what that end of that hammer does. No, it's called a Venturi forge. It runs on straight liquefied propane, and at the top, right there, there's a little manifold with some holes in it right there. And you can adjust that because when the propane comes out of the little tiny orifice that is 0.03 inches, it draws air from the manifold and it mixes, and that's how you get that forge to get hot enough. Now, you can't do it with natural gas. A natural gas forge, you have to have a blower. But with a propane forge, you don't. Well, this is a one burner forge, and I have a really good regulator on it, and I turn it way down. For doing this light forging like I'm doing here, I have the ability to turn the forge way down, and so it's quiet because I'm doing a live stream. If I wasn't live streaming, I'd crank the regulator up, and I'd run it a little hotter. But it's plenty hot for doing this little stuff that I'm doing now. And it's just a little one burner, and so it's very efficient. That 10-gallon, I'll run for a month on that 10-gallon. If I'm only forging 4 or 5 hours a day, I can run for 3 weeks on that 10-gallon propane. So I'm going to leave that in there as a decorative element. So after I flatten that out and fishtailed that out, I go back in there and I just lightly with some planishing blows, put some light marks in there to add a little decorative to those. So, gotta have a little quench tank filled with water, and I use a metal can. You always got to use metal. You can't use a plastic one because if you're doing a lot of work, the water will actually get hot enough to soften up the plastic enough that the can will slump. So you always want to use a metal can, and if you put a pair of tongs in there and they're hot, and you have a plastic container and you put them in there, it'll melt right down through the side of that. So you always want to use a metal can. There's our finished hook. And that's kind of the rough forging. I'll take it over when they cool off. I'll take them over and I'll grind this round. And I can kind of do that on the anvil, but I find that it's just as easy to take them over to the belt grinder and grind them around. I get a little better finish on it. So that's what that is. Now you could use a jig. You could bend those in a jig if you wanted to. But I've done so many of them freehand that I have a hard time doing them in a jig anymore after, I think I've been building these for 15 years. So I'm going to set that can just out of sight over here. So I got my whole amp to use. Then I'm very carefully going to bend this up. It's like I have a little shunt. See that little speckle coming up there? It's called a shunt. Think of it like when you file your fingernails off. So I just filed that down a little bit. Now it'll make a shiny spot in there, so I'll have to go back in and put it back in the forge and heat it back up, and then it'll re-black. It will re-mill scale everything. There's probably 50 ways to do these hooks like I'm doing, these little hooks that I'm working on, but there's a lot of considerations when you do them. So I'm shipping them, and I ship them in a flat rate sack most of the time. And so you can't have anything sharp or sticky uppy that's going to punch through the sack. And so part of the design that I do is taking into consideration that I'm shipping them. So I've just done so many. I think I've probably done darn near 3,000 of these. Yeah, I do door knockers occasionally. My favorite thing to do door knockers is I make a spur. I'll do a spur and I'll make a door knocker out of a spur. If you go to my Instagram or my Pinterest, or you can probably find some of those in some of the short videos that I've posted. You can actually see them. I'm pretty good at documenting everything that I build. Thanks for the likes. I appreciate that. Now we've got the basic part of the hook made up. I can get them fairly even. I've just done so many. Like I said, the trick is to use the same place on the anvil every time. You always use the same spot. For this next step, I'm going to use a different style of tone. This gets me out of my own way when I'm doing these. I might set this hook over here. So I need that for this, but I need this for this. If I'm really kicking along and I'm just doing these, I can do a lot of these if I'm just doing these. But for the sake of doing the live stream, we're working on a bunch of different stuff. So this is a huge anvil. Huge for me. It weighs about 250 pounds. And so a lot of the things on it are too big. For doing this small stuff, I've got a little 100-pound anvil over here where everything's a little more petite. And for doing the smaller stuff like these hooks, this 100-pound anvil works a lot better. All right, and now you guys are going to get to see a different tool. So I'm going to show you, you're going to get a chance to see the treadle hammer at work here. There's our hook finished up. All right, well, there we have it. We're almost 2 hours. That's a fairly good live stream. If you like the content, please subscribe and like. go watch some of my other videos. That would be great. If you want to see me forging knives and all the tooling and stuff, you can sure see that on my in my regular videos. I passed 100,000 subscribers here. Oh, I don't know, about 4 months ago, and it's been a struggle since then to gain any followers. So, but if you subscribe and like, that would be really fantastic. If you want to see some of the other stuff I build, you can just Google Cody Iron Works, and 35 years of work comes up. I think this is the 11th year for my YouTube channel. So I've been producing, I think I've got 1,100, I'm going on 1,200 videos. Thanks everybody. Thanks everybody for coming in. Get it hot and hit it. Always wear your safety squints. Have a great evening, everybody.